Okay, Mr. Murphy, we are streaming live.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the May 24th regular meeting of the Millburn Board of Education. Please, a roll call, please.
Ms. Voss?
Present.
Mr. Coleman?
Present.
Mr. Gray? Mr. Lorenzen?
Present.
Mr. Murphy?
Here.
Mr. Pederini?
Here.
Mr. Quinones?
Here.
All right, welcome everyone. Shall we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, do we have any public comments?
I did not see any public comments.
No public comment? Does anybody have any addition of non-action items? Action items, approve the Board of Education meeting dates for 2021, 2022.
I move to approve the board meeting dates of 21-22.
Second. Does anybody have any dates they can't make, or? I know I can't make July 26th. So, you guys want to go on without me, or do we want to try and find an alternate date for that? That is a regular meeting, so we'll be voting on stuff.
I know that I will probably not be at June 28th, which is on from the old calendar, so you'd already noted that.
I'm fine moving forward, right, if everyone else is gonna be
I'm
here.
good with it, we've done it before. I think we'll have quorum.
Okay, sounds good. If there's any objections or questions, can we have a vote, please?
Ms. Voss?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes?
Mr. Lorenzen?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Pederini?
Yes.
Mr. Quinones?
Yes.
The motion passed.
All right. Motion passes, and our next one is, approve the Cottonwood Estates and, annual impact fee. There's no amount for that.
Yeah, that part probably shouldn't have been on there. For the Cottonwood Estates, it goes up by the percentage of CPI as of December 2020 compared to December 2019. And it's different for each home depending on the number of bedrooms. And I believe in my report, there's a copy of the chart that shows what those fees are.
Yep.
Right up here. So for 2 bedrooms, 1328, 3 bedrooms, 3648, 4 bedrooms, 5307, and 5 bedrooms, 6682.
Where is Cottonwood Estates?
Close to Miller Road.
Miller, it's off of Miller Road between Beck and Highway 45. Okay. To the north of Miller Road is a forest preserve, and that would be in Antioch School District. To the south of Miller Road is our school district.
Okay. And it's not one that we typically get a lot of new, what are there, 3 homes there now? 3 or 4?
And how many are we expecting total? Like there's no defined.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what would the motion be, that we approve the contract as presented to us by?
You're gonna approve the, let's see what it's called here.
The agreement between us and Lake County?
Right, that's really what it is, it's that agreement between. Yeah, it's basically the, agreement with Lake County for, receiving contributions on our behalf for the impact fees.
How would we put that in?
I don't know, we'll figure that, if
Well,
you wanna
what-
make the motion, we'll figure that out.
I'll make the motion, just.
So if, as a point of order, if anybody develops a motion and states it, you can say, so moved, as Robert's rules of order. And then you need a second, and then that gets read into the,
So I will move that we approve the agreement as presented.
okay.
Second.
All right, any, questions or discussion on this?
I'm assuming these are very standard numbers, right? For new
It's all governed, it was, what, 1.4% for this year, was the increase?
It's by the CPI,
Okay.
so, yeah.
It is what it is.
It's-
Yeah, it matches the same numbers that we used to do our, that we can increase our levy as well.
Okay.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Quinones,
Yes.
Ms. Boss,
Yes.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes?
Mr. Lorenzen,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Mr. Pederini,
Yes.
the motion passed.
Moving on to the approval to purchase district membership for Lake County Educational Services Professional Development Cooperative for the 2021-2022 school year in the amount of $3,209.
I have a question about this. Does the LCES, I mean, what specifically is this? Are they coordinating all professional, like all PD for the entire district? Just specific stuff? Like I just need further explanation on
Sure.
its intent.
Its intent is to, give us a certain number of days of professional development with the Lake County Educational Service provider. So, they have a science specialist, a reading specialist, and a math specialist. I think science and math might be one person, but they would come out to the district and work with us on developing standards. For example, this year, they came out and worked with our teachers in developing shorter standards, compressing our standards for this year because we anticipated not getting through all of the standards of a typical year because of our short schedule. So they came out and did that with our teachers and led that process. So they have, we're just tapping into their expertise.
Okay, thank you.
So basically, we're hiring trainers to come out.
Yeah.
Correct. And it's a very good rate, and we get some of that money actually back as well, so it's a great deal for us.
Could we leverage that with the paraprofessionals to get some training for them,
For the
paraprofessionals?
paraprofessionals, they don't have that training yet, but that's a good question. These are, these mostly work with teachers and curriculum directors on curriculum specific. So paraprofessional training would be, not within their particular purview and strength, but there's other maybe avenues we can pursue with paraprofessionals.
And you guys have identified the specific skills, standards, et cetera, that we need work on?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so it's not like we're just flying blind, it's saying, hey, we need help with this in English, this in science, okay.
Any other questions? We have a roll call, please.
Mr. Pederini,
Yes,
Mr. Quinones,
Yes.
Ms. Boss,
Yes.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes.
Mr. Gray. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Lorenzen,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
the motion passed.
Moving on to approve the amendment to Arbor Management for the summer school food service program effective April 1st, 2021.
Yeah, I just briefly mentioned on this one, basically all year, ever since September 1st, we've been running on what's called the Summer Food Service Program, which provides the district with a higher rate of reimbursement and doesn't charge the students anything for receiving lunches. During that week or so in August, we went with the National School Lunch Program, which is a program we typically do. They've now extended this summer food service program to go through the end of next school year. So all of next year as well, the lunches will be free for all students. The amendment, basically, because we had such high participation, they're basically reducing the rate that they charge us for those lunches in that amendment. And then the second item is the renewal, which is based on the food away from home CPI.
Where does this money come from?
This is USDA money that comes from the federal government.
So inevitably from taxes from all, not just us, but from the nation, taxes pooled and.
Yeah, and the summer food service program is basically nationwide and available to every
Okay.
student in the entire country.
Any more questions? Okay. Can we have a roll call, please?
We need, a motion
Okay,
first.
we're sorry, we didn't get a motion. We did not get a motion on approving the amendment 2 with Arbor Management.
So moved.
Second?
Now, can we have a roll call?
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Petterini?
Yes.
Mr. Quinones?
Yes.
Ms. Boss?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes?
Mr. Lorenzen?
Yes.
The motion passed.
Moving on, we approve the Arbor Management contract renewal for the 2021-22 school year.
This is a kind of similar thing. This is the renewal. Basically, when you do a food service contract, you can renew it up to 4 times, so for a total of 5 years. This is actually our 5th year, so it's our 4th renewal. So a year from, well, probably starting in February or March next year, we'll have to actually go out to bid again to get that. But we are able to approve this 1 additional year at the food away from home rate, which was 3.9%, I believe.
Yes.
And then there's also an adjustment for the increase in minimum wage is also allowable under the contract.
So overall, I thought it was pretty low, considering what inflation is, and what I've seen in inflated prices wholesale may be different, but.
And basically the way the contract is written, I don't know if it'll change. There's been some discussion of changing it, but basically we're pretty much given a template from the state that we have to follow, and before I can even bring the recommendation to the board, I have to get the state food service school nutrition person to sign off on the recommendation at the state level before it comes to the board. There's been some discussion about changing that, but there hasn't been any legislation that's gone through yet that's made that change. But it is it's definitely good. I know that one district I was in the year before I moved there, or started there, they had decided they were gonna rebid the contract, and they ended up with the same contractor at a higher price than they would have gotten had they accepted the renewal. Not saying that's how it's always gonna work, but
I was gonna say,
in that case, it opened it up, and then all of a sudden, like I said, they ended up with the same contractor at a higher price than they could have gotten the renewal for,
I
so.
mean, how high is the percentage of us renewing for next year? I mean, obviously, we have to rebid everything,
Right.
but, I mean, what's the odds of just continuing, maybe not with this company, but with another company at a long?
Well, if we have to do another company, it's about a 2-month process
Okay.
to go through to get it approved, so it's not something I would recommend.
Okay, so the odds are high that this company's gonna win the bid next year
Correct.
again.
Well,
Next year for the
you
following
never
year?
know what's
Yeah.
gonna happen.
Yeah, he's talking about next year for the following year.
Then we have
Yeah.
to, when we have to rewrite it.
As far as I know, and I don't remember the date when Melbourne started using the school lunch program, but Arbor has won the bid every 5 years when Melbourne has rebid it. So the odds are probably good. It's one of those, I don't know how the market's gonna shake out after the pandemic. There could be somebody else that comes in with a better price. And we're not always because we're a relatively small district too, some of the larger companies tend to bid larger school district contracts.
But at least as far as the wages are concerned, the minimum wage is gonna have heavy influence on it,
Yeah,
so.
it does.
I can't see there being a lot of different competition in the wage
No,
categories,
no.
so. That should remain fairly consistent.
Can we get a motion to approve the Arbor Management contract renewal?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the Arbor contract for next year.
Second.
Do you have any other questions, comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Lorenzen,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Mr. Pederini,
Yes.
Mr. Quinones,
Yes.
Ms. Boss,
Yes.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes.
the motion passed.
Thank you. Moving on to approve the tentative amendment for the fiscal year 2021 budget for public display.
As I think everybody's aware, we've had some tremendous challenges this year. We've had to reallocate how we use staff. We've had to add pull in some additional hours from parapros, et cetera, to assist, for instance, like at the middle school with restroom breaks, et cetera, to monitor students with the distancing requirements, et cetera. And then we've had a lot of federal dollars that have been coming into the district, both from Lake County through the CARES Act, as well as through the ESSERS program, the elementary, secondary, something or other
Emergency response.
yeah, the Emergency Response Act. As well as in order to get the third round of ESSERS dollars, we had to apply for Title I. And so all of a sudden now we're having a summer program that in past years we haven't had, so we have to add in those salaries and benefits, et cetera, that will be paid through both Title I as well as the ESSERS grant. So I tried in the comparison that I did, do you wanna pull that one up, Jason, in one
I
spreadsheet?
do, yes.
Okay. It kind of looks at, in broad categories, what the original budget was and what the amended budget is.
I don't see a total. Oh, there it is. Well, no, I don't see a total. But it looks like it could potentially be favorable, right? On a comparison?
Overall, I think it is, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Some funds are different than others. And we did end up with, like I said, even in the education budget, there were some of the sports and things that we didn't have, so we have those dollars left over, but then on the other side of it, we also didn't get that revenue for those activities. The before and after school club program, we still continue to offer it. We paid all the employees as if they were working because, there were periods of time where we had very small numbers of students. Other times when we had larger numbers of students, and we're getting larger numbers now and seeing a little bit more revenue now than we did early on, but nothing like we had the prior year. Even some of our fees, et cetera, the numbers are down from where they were the prior year.
And the estimates for this upcoming school year are based on numbers pre-COVID, right? We're assuming that we're gonna receive that revenue,
Correct.
the same numbers, okay.
Yeah, this is the amending the current year budget. The next year's budget we'll work on next.
Okay.
Over the summer and then have that ready to adopt has to be adopted by September 30th. We did have less transportation dollars. Now, the one thing that will occur next year, transportation dollars are based on your mileage and expenses in the prior year. So we'll probably get less transportation dollars in 2021-22 than we did this year. But I won't know that for sure until I do the claim. And then the other thing is, if there are additional dollars, sometimes they prorate those dollars, so it's possible that we could end up close to the same, but that's something we don't typically know until August or September.
Is there any way we can reach out to our state representatives to fix that? Because, I mean, every school district in the state's gonna feel that
Yeah, they will.
pinch next year. So it would be incumbent on the state legislature to say, hey, we'll go back and use the 19
And
number.
it probably is important. One of the things that they have done that has helped us a lot, we've been doing school lunch deliveries, and we're allowed to count those as regular transportation miles. So that's added to our transportation, but we haven't had any of the educational field trips. I don't know if we've had any where we've taken buses. If we have, it's only been one or two. But most of the time, you know, we're doing several field trips. Some of our private, special ed students that we would transport to and from school every day have been working remote all year. So we won't have those miles. So it's not gonna be significant, but there will be a drop in revenue for that following year. And it is important to let the legislators know that is not only, will not only impact us, but other districts, across the state.
Anything else? We have a motion to approve the tentative amended fiscal year 21 budget for the public display.
So moved?
Second.
We have a roll call, please.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes.
Mr. Lorenzen,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy,
Yes.
Mr. Pederini,
Yes.
Mr. Quinones,
Yes.
Ms. Boss.
Yes.
The motion passed.
Moving on to the iPad lease and or purchase.
Okay. So typically, we discuss, major purchases like this at the committee of the whole meeting, and then have a chance to ask any questions and then vote on it at the regular meeting like tonight. This opportunity, however, presented itself last Wednesday when the Apple salesperson sent me the information on what our current iPad value was with the ones we purchased 4 years ago. So we purchased 930 iPads 4 years ago. We've been using them for 4 years, and now they're nearing the end of their life. But I was planning on renewing them at the end of next year, or even the year after that, if we could somehow manage to get them that far. But he valued them, found a third-party company that would pay us up to $240 per iPad if they're grade A quality. Obviously, if they have cracked screens or they have broken jacks or not functioning, they're not going to pay that much. There's a range for that, but for a grade A iPad, up to $240, which is absolutely amazing. And typically, we would get 100, maybe 125 for that at this point. So it was that, and then they're offering this new refresh of that unit, and so we would end up saving money, a little bit of money over the long haul, and getting that newer upgrade sooner, so we don't have to. It's just easier to use a newer device.
Yeah.
So
Less bugs with the greater use of the iPad. When they bug out, it's really frustrating for students. So I think that would be a really big help, I think it's a really nice opportunity.
Yes, thank you, yes. Because that's, what we were looking at too, and we've been talking about is, with the tech team, is that the current iPads that these are the elementary school kids' iPads, because the middle school just got the new ones, we bought them last summer, so they have the new, newer keyboards and keyboard covers, cases. We've been having a lot of problems with the K-5 keyboard cases. First of all, they don't protect the iPad exceptionally well for young kids who tend to drop them a little more. And the keyboard cases are malfunctioning. They're not accepting charges anymore. It was the best design we had at the time, but they're not as good as the newer ones. So this would allow us to get rid of all those keyboard cases, which are now out of warranty, start with new keyboard cases, and then K-8, we'd have the same model of iPad that we're working with too, which helps our tech team because they're not working with different systems, so. Yeah, it's much nicer, more convenient to get those earlier. It seemed like kind of a no-brainer to me, but I'd like to have more time with generally.
Did they provide an estimate of what they might be worth if we kept them for the extra time?
They said half next year.
Didn't you figure out it was about $60,000 savings over the next 2 or 3 cycles? You're going ahead and doing that as opposed to waiting and replacing them later.
Yeah, approximately.
And how long are the new iPads supposed to last? What's their service life?
That's a good question. We have some iPads that are 6 years old that we still use. So we can get 6 years out of them, but in that last year, it gets to be pretty difficult. Some of the older iPads don't accept some of the upgrades to the apps that we have now. And so it's hard for the tech team to provide services for those iPads. That's one of the challenges. But yeah, we can, typically 5 years, we were planning on getting 5 years out of these. The only challenge would have been the keyboards.
So if we got the same iPads for the middle school last year, then we should expect, so then they would have what, 1 year on the elementary school pads or 2 years? 1 year, okay. So we would base it off the middle school life for 5 years, and we'll replace these after 4-ish?
Possibly.
Possibly.
Possibly. That'll be a decision that we'll have to look at 4 years from now to see, do we extend them out, or do we want to stagger the lease payments, or?
But they're not, okay. We
It's
don't know if they're gonna.
It's a challenge because it's a different market all the time. Right now, the used iPad market's high, kind of like used cars. If you've got a used car, now's the time to sell one, but of course you don't want to buy one. And the new price for the iPads are pretty much the same as what we've always paid, so that market hasn't gone up significantly. And my question was, can we get them in time, because it seems tight. And he said, yes, we're looking at early to mid-July at this point, which I was impressed by.
Jason, for those iPads, you said that, we would get a certain price, $150, if they're at a certain quality level, right? Given the fact that I think everyone pays that insurance for each iPad, right, for every student, so wouldn't we service any of a broken iPad to get them to that highest quality before giving them back?
I asked them about that, and they said, no, it won't matter.
I mean, the amount that you're gonna spend to repair it to bring it up to that level is probably gonna be what you would get in additional, it could even be more than what you get in additional costs, but the majority of, didn't the tech team pretty much say the majority of the iPads that we have though are fairly good quality? I mean, the number of repairs we have compared to other districts is, at least from what I've heard, is pretty, our kids are usually pretty good with them.
And we have pretty good cases. They do fall and break, drop them and break them, but The keyboard cases have been a challenge.
And those have been a challenge, I think, since day one.
Right.
But we kind of kept them because they were under warranty for the first, I think, 3 years.
3 years, and we've had them 4 years. They've actually honored the warranty, which has been very impressive. So we keep sending them, they keep sending them back fixed, so they're doing something. But they're no longer making that keyboard case, so it's not available anymore. We had a plan for next year, to do the keyboard case, to patch the keyboard cases. We're gonna not do keyboards for kindergarten and first grade and take those keyboards then and have an extra supply ready, so when they break, we just put them in, and as long as the company keeps sending us back new ones, we'll keep doing it. We just don't know when that will end. But this seems like a better option for us at this time.
Is that what you have right there? Is that the?
Yeah, am I gonna have to turn this in right away?
That's, so, the new ones are seventh generation or eighth generation, I'm not sure which one we're getting, but that's what they're on, that's a Gen 5.
Would the case be like that though?
The case will not be like that, that's,
Something sturdier?
yes. Yeah, the cases we would get surround the iPad
Mm-hmm, okay.
versus these that are not quite as protective, but are nicer, professional looking, kind of adultish, one might say. I like this case. And they're a little bit, the iPads are a little bit bigger than the newer ones. It's a 10.2 inch versus a 9.7 inch screen. So slightly bigger.
Did I mention earlier about the emergency connectivity funds for E-rate? I can't remember if I did once we started the meeting or not, but there is something that it's brand new. It goes along with one of the Recovery Act pieces of legislation. And a window is supposed to be opening up effective July 1 for us to, if we're purchasing devices that allow students to work remotely or with technology, we can apply to get 100% reimbursement on those devices. It's kind of a I think it's first come, first served, but the rules are out, but the window hasn't been announced yet. So it's gonna be sometime, June, July, that window would open. I did talk to our consultant that we worked with earlier today, and he feels pretty confident that we would at least get the first year's lease payment, if not the entire cost of the devices reimbursed. And then the way this fund is set up, once they go through the future purchases, if there's any money left, then they go back and let you apply for the purchases you made the prior year, which would be our other lease, that potentially we could get some dollars out of.
So that potential $60,000 savings includes this
No.
program? No.
Now, this program, I didn't really find out for sure that we would even potentially qualify until this morning.
Okay.
So this is brand new that potentially could wipe all of this out, but
That would
maybe
be
all
awesome.
but the interest, but we don't know that for sure.
That would be amazing if we got that too.
But it is something that as soon as the window opens, we're gonna I plan to go ahead and apply on behalf of the district to try and recover whatever we can through the federal program.
Yeah, we're definitely more reliant on our devices, as you guys know, it's kind of obvious this year, so that's what's making me push this along, and I didn't think we'd get that great of a deal. And we had already planned on collecting all the old ones this year anyway, just to get our hands on them and make sure that we still have inventory, because some we haven't seen for a couple of years. So hopefully we'll get back our 925 that are out there somewhere, or close to it. I'm sure we'll miss some few, but that's loss. But that's our plan if the board goes ahead and approves the lease.
Any more questions? Thank you. Can we get a motion on approving this iPad lease and or purchase?
So moved.
Second, someone?
Second.
All right, can we have a roll call, please?
Ms. Boss?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes?
Mr. Lorenzen?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Pederini?
Yes.
Mr. Quinones?
Yes.
The motion passed.
Now on to our consent agenda, which includes approval of minutes, personnel reports, and lots of personnel reports,
Lots
and some summer school professional development. Anyone have questions?
I'd like to make the,
Go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion on the approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
Any questions, comments, complaints? Don't want to see some of these teachers go, but I guess they can resign if they want.
Yes, retire.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Quinones?
Yes.
Ms. Boss?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes.
Mr. Lorenzen?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Pederini?
Yes.
The motion passed.
Great, thank you.
And information discussion, summer school. So how is summer school going? Do we got enough teachers?
We have enough teachers. In fact, we may have to hire one more first grade teacher, Dr. Johns.
Okay.
We have a lot of kids in first grade. I think there's 40, almost 43, somewhere in that kids signed up for first grade, which is great. So we may need a fourth teacher for that. Yeah, it's going well. It's gonna get a little bit crazy as far as prepping for that in the next few days, getting all the details in, but I was impressed with the numbers of enrollees, and especially at the middle school level, which shocked me. I didn't ever imagine we'd have that many kids sign up for those classes, but they're fun classes, they're creative classes that the teachers have put together, and I'm very excited about that. In fact, the cooking class had 53 students sign up.
Good.
It's like, I think we might have to have a cooking program or some after school events coming up, so that's exciting. So we had to redo Ms. Berg, the summer school coordinator, had to redo the schedule and work through that so that we could divide that class up a little bit and hire more teachers for middle school.
Good problem to have.
It's a good problem to have, challenging now, and we'll make it work. But I'm pretty excited. I'm pretty excited about the program and what it does for kids. Gets them out of the house, and some kids are done with school and understanding. That's great. Whatever the kids need to do to take a break, or parents, wonderful. But if kids can come and have a good experience and just engage their brains for a few hours, for a few weeks, I think that's a win for everybody. So we will do that.
Has transportation been worked out, or are you still working on,
we're
waiting
still-
on numbers and all?
We're starting to, the bus routes are being created now. I mean, that'll be working out till the day before, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna review those tomorrow, and then we're gonna send it out to the bus drivers, and Thursday we've got a meeting to bid those out to the bus drivers, so. And from at least the number of drivers that have indicated their willingness to work this summer, we should be able to fill all the routes.
Will that help fill out then some of our gaps that we're missing with the miles and?
It will help, because through June 30th is still the school year. So that will add additional miles. And we not only have this summer school program, but also the extended school year program that we typically have had in the summer. So, and it's about 3 or 4 days longer than the summer school program. It runs, I think, till June 28th or 30th.
Yeah, that's right. Right
It
through
runs
the-
close to the end of June.
When does this summer school kick off? Is it that next week?
June 7th.
Okay.
So we have 1 week off,
Mhm.
and then we start summer school.
Is MBAC gonna be available during the summer period?
MBAC is not available in the summers, but Echo Day Camp operates at the middle school, so that's another option. Lindenhurst Park District has a camp, summer camp, that are options for parents for looking for that full daycare. We're not set up to do that with MBAC. MBAC is just before and after school, but to do a full day camp, we're just not set up for that, so, but there's other operators in the area that can fill that need.
Great, glad to hear everything's going well. Let's hear about our district goals.
Our district goals, tonight would have been the 5th district goal, which was all about finances, and you heard a lot about finances tonight. Probably hear a little bit more in Dr. John's business report, so that will be our goal, is to run a balanced budget every year, communicate the finances with the board, and we talk about our finances a lot. So we're in good shape for this year, and continuing on with that. Remote learning.
Remote learning update, yeah.
So the state had, I think somebody mentioned that earlier, the state had a resolution last week that said that next year, basically parents won't have a choice to do remote learning or in-person learning. They're going to say that the default, or that the idea is all in-person learning for every student. The only exceptions would be for medically fragile students. And in that resolution, I believe that they said that not even a vulnerable parent or household member in the household would count for that. So at first, when they came out a month ago, there would be exceptions for it. If someone in the household would be medically fragile or particularly vulnerable to COVID, then that student wouldn't have to go to school. They could stay home with the doctor's note. Now they're saying that's not even going to count. It's only if the student themselves are medically fragile with the doctor's note under certain conditions would be able to stay home, and that the school district would only be required to provide the typical medical homebound tutoring that we would with any illness. So it's basically going back to the rules that we operated under as far as attendance goes pre-COVID. Homebound tutoring is 5 hours a week that we would be, as a school district, required to provide for that student. Typically, we would hire, let's say a student has a long-term illness like leukemia and is hospital bound. Sometimes hospitals provide that service in their children's ward, and then they would communicate with the school and the teacher to get homework and be able to provide those services. When the child comes home, then we would hire one of our teachers to do the homebound tutoring, and it's an hour a day. They might go after school and spend an hour with the child in the home and provide that extra tutoring just to get them, help them keep caught up if the child's healthy enough, etc. So that would be the rules that they're going under. So what I'm waiting for from ISB, what we're all waiting for, is those specific criteria. Is it just a doctor's note? Is it certain conditions that the doctor's note would have to identify that would cause that student to stay home? But in the end, all it matters is that the state is saying, no, we don't have to provide remote learning for students next year.
And this passed already?
Yeah, that was passed last Wednesday. But huge caveats in there. They said many, many times that districts have flexibility. So you can do whatever you would like locally. So will be the challenge for us. And again, I don't know what those conditions will be. We just don't know yet. So I will keep the board informed as far as the regulations, and then if we have to make a decision at some point where we say, okay, under these conditions, board, would you approve us providing a remote opportunity for students? This is what it would cost, and this is what we would provide, and are we willing to spend those resources, both in teacher time and financially, to provide those services? So that could be a tough decision for the board at some point. I just don't know. I don't have enough information to present a proposal at this time.
So basically what we're saying is last month if somebody wanted to stay home, we would have to give them
Yeah.
remote. But now this month, if somebody wants to stay home, we don't necessarily have to give them remote teaching.
Right.
Which could save us some money if we were doing that, but on the other hand.
Right.
Yeah, okay. All right, anybody have any questions on anything? The asbestos abatement.
Sorry, I do have one question.
Yeah.
So you said at some point we might need to make that decision. When is that point?
July.
July? And that would give you enough time to make the arrangements if we choose to go with the more conservative option where we let the kids stay at home. Okay.
Yeah, and the reason I say July is parents would have to decide and plan. And as a school district, I know we're not gonna have any proposal with any specificity before July. No way we'll have anything June-wise. Even if we had the information today, June would be a tough ramp up, because there's contractual concerns, there's all, depending on what we decided to offer and how we decided to implement it, there's a huge range of ideas. So I've talked about virtual school, I've talked about, we could hire a third party to do virtual school. It costs $3,700 per child that's per year, per child at the elementary level.
We potentially talked about getting districts together, right, and doing
Districts, the Regional Office of Education is still looking into that, but I think that is not realistic. They're still working on it, but I'm not planning on that option, but possible. Again, no one knows what the parameters are to operate under. How do you make a plan when we don't know what the parameters are? Are we talking about 5% of children, or are we talking about 1%?
Well, what percent of the children now do all remote?
20-ish. When we started, it was closer to 30 in some grade levels, and it was different in each grade level, but the range was between 25 and 30. And I'd say lately more kids have come back, especially at the middle school. After spring break, I think when the numbers came down in the community, more parents were ready to send their kids back.
Given the decision of the ISBE, is it time to send out via thought exchange, communication saying the ISBE is mandated in-person learning, and here's what we could offer? Here's what they're recommending we offer, and because I imagine any funds that would allow us to incur some additional costs due to something more than what's minimally required, I can't see those coming. Right? Very, very unlikely.
Yeah.
Not saying that we make a decision,
No,
right? Or that
no,
a
just
decision's
gathering
made, but just that, knowing that.
Right, I
just communicate.
had one ready to go a couple weeks ago, and then they came out with this resolution that kind of
Yeah.
changed the rules again. So I want to be careful about I was trying to wait for more specificity before I did that, to say,
Yeah,
so parents would, what I wanna know is, will you keep your kid home if this is the
right,
X, Y, and Z is the
right.
rule?
So prior to COVID, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, I'm sure in the district we had like immunocompromised children, right? And while no one's saying that COVID is the same as the flu, I mean, the flu is a potentially deadly disease, right? So I'm assuming these kids probably wouldn't be in school either, so how are they receiving education? Or were they coming to school?
They were coming to school. The kids that were, receiving the homebound instruction, it was pretty rare. We would have a couple of kids each year, and it could be for, different types of surgeries. I don't wanna go too specific to identify kids. If a student had cancer for some form of cancer, and they're hospitalized getting chemo treatments for a long period of time, that's when we would provide those services.
Yeah.
And sometimes those kids were immunocompromised, but more of the impact was not just the immunocompromised, but also the impact of chemo on their system.
Yeah.
They just didn't have the energy to be in school. But then they would not always do homebound instruction either, because they're just so wiped out,
Right.
they couldn't. It's hard to learn when you're that ill.
Yeah. I guess the kind of just initial thoughts that I had is also I think we need to be careful about the precedent that we're setting, right? Because is this a 1-year exception that we're doing into 2021, 22, or does this become the norm, right? And then from what kind of costs we're incurring as a district, how does that change from year to year? Like, given the fact that it seems like we had a way of managing these types of students prior to COVID happening.
Yeah, it seems like the announcement is like a reset, kind of like you had said before. It's basically a reset to where we were at prior to COVID, which was a year and a half ago,
Yeah.
Well, it's amazing.
Well, that's assuming that we take
14 months ago. Yeah.
The state's kind of guidance on it, right?
Yeah.
If we choose to go a different direction, I mean, that's fine, right, if we feel that's right for the district, but we just need to be considerate about
Absolutely.
how long that exception is gonna be in place.
Wouldn't that also be dependent on the state? I mean, our hands might be tied if the state's saying we have to do it.
Well, they're not though.
Well, within these guidelines.
Well, yeah, they mandated in person, but then now they've allowed flexibility
At the
for
local level.
implementation at the local level, right, at the district level, so. There it is.
So I suppose any parent can not send their student their child to public school, but then they're responsible for the education of the child. So, but now we have the flexibility of, hey, I don't really feel comfortable because my kid can't get the vaccine or hasn't been able to, it's not approved for them, and I don't feel comfortable. What are you gonna do for me? And we might have some flexibility on that end. But it would certainly.
That is a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a
very
good
slippery
point.
slope.
And it'll make things more clear once we hear what these additional criteria are, right? If there's not just a doctor's note, but you have to have this, 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 and this. So perhaps if we abide by those, that almost becomes a safety net for us, as opposed to saying, all right, well, now we've got 50 kids who wanna stay home just because they learn better or whatever. And that's not really the case, they should be in person. So, yeah, I think we have to do some weighting and weigh some of these options, discussion.
All right, all good? Yeah. Okay. Shall we move on to asbestos?
Sure. We've now had our second, hot water, heating and ventilation related leak in the building the second one occurred the end of April. The other one occurred, I think, February in the downstairs section of the 1968 edition. I
Want
believe
me
it's
to pull up
68.
your business,
Sure. So the claim adjuster was out here on May 18th. The area that's damaged is about 10 feet by 15 feet, so it's not very large, but by the time you pay the consultant to draw up everything and pay the contractor to come up and mobilize to do a 10 by 15 foot area, they can do a much larger area for the same cost. So then Jason and I started doing some discussion back and forth with each other. The consultant was out last Friday and measured areas, and I said, well, what if we add, you know, the 1961 section as well as the second floor of the 68 edition, which is above where we had the damage before. So if we are able to do all of that, the only areas where there would be asbestos tile left would be like underneath lockers or whatever, that we don't have any immediate anticipation that we're gonna remove those. And if those would get wet, it wouldn't be where, you know, the asbestos fibers could be released into the air. This area that is in the picture is currently underneath walk-off mats. So it's relatively, you know, it's relatively protected for the moment. But it is something that needs to be dealt with. We did look, and so what we're planning to do is put a bid out for the removal and have a base bid and 5 different alternates. The base bid, because that will determine what the insurance company pays. I believe we have I can't remember if it's $2,500 or $10,000 deductible. And then they would pay above that. So looking at just the flooded area only is about $16,200 to $18,200. If we do all of these things, they're estimating between $80,000 and $90,000 to remove all the tile, and then we have to pay to replace it. So what I'm proposing is we'll go ahead and send the bids out, have the contractors come in. By doing it in phases, we can accept the base bid and then however many alternates we can afford. And then also in that time frame, I'll have looked at how quickly we can get tile and or carpet, depending on the area, put back in there so that when school starts in August, we can do that. Now, if we do everything, we will be doing it in 2 phases. One phase would be everything except the 1961 original building. And then it will be done last, but we'd still use the same area for them to enter, et cetera. But that would allow us to start getting people back in their rooms sooner than that. If we chose to have it all done in the same time frame, then the law requires us to have 2 people on site instead of 1 person on site, so that doubles the consultant cost for that. So it definitely saves us about $15,000 just to do it in 2 phases. So we will be looking at and the dates in here are pretty close. I just talked with the consultant's office again today, and so some of these dates are off by a day or 2, but looking at having the bids due June 9th, and then I would have a report that we can send out to the board on June 11th, and then we would have to do a special board meeting on the 14th to award bids, depending on what we can do. They would start mobilizing, setting up the containment areas on June 28th, and that also gives us enough time to provide the 10-day notice to both the Illinois Department of Public Health as well as to parents and staff members, et cetera. But I don't believe any of those areas that are affected were areas that we were going to be using for the summer program. Now, the bad thing is that in my last year here at Melbourne, I'll have to move twice because I'm within that area. But, you know, looking at the long-term impact that this will have as far as not having these surprises come up in the future would be well worth it for the district, I believe.
Stephen, I'm not sure that I understand the financial implications here. So we have the small portion, right, the 10 by 15.
Right.
And to do that alone, it would be, you said $18,000, right?
Yes.
We have a $2,500 deductible, I think you mentioned?
It's either 25, I can't remember if it's 2,500 or 10,000. I get confused. We've got.
Or so let's say it's 10,000, right? So then out of pocket about, 10 grand, and then they pay the rest. Would the insurance company be paying, if we chose to do the entire, all 5 alternates?
They would only be paying whatever
That-
that cost,
10 by
that's why
15.
we're doing the base bid as the damaged area.
Okay,
Because then they know how much their cost would be of the total cost.
got it. So I guess what you're proposing, if we were to be able to do all of it, you said it was 90,000?
Correct.
So we'd be paying, we'd get about a $7,000 savings, assuming it was a $10,000 deductible, about $8,000 savings, right?
Well, I believe that cost, yeah, probably, 7,000 to 8,000. But even then, for that same 17,000, we could do a larger area than just the 10 by 15 foot area.
Okay.
So then it's a question of where do you, so kind of one of the, options is just to do the entire hallway that's adjacent to that, which goes from the 61 edition all the way down the hallway to the stairs that go up into the 1968 edition.
Yeah.
And and I have misplaced my other little cheat sheet where I had a lot of numbers written, but,
So I think
well, the entire hallway only, he was estimating 22 to 24,000. So it's gonna be about $6,000 more to do that entire hallway than it is to do a 10 by 15 foot area.
Okay.
So the question is, do we want to continue dealing with, something happens and all of a sudden we have to act
10 grand
immediately
out of pocket.
and evacuate that area, et cetera, or do we want to be proactive if
Yeah.
we can afford to and just go ahead and get rid of it?
Okay.
And, I'm good either way, but,
Is there a rough figure we can use just to determine cost per square foot? Outside of the base bid?
yeah, why don't I email that to you? Because what I have here were the numbers before I looked at adding those other two areas. But,
do you have the total square footage?
yeah, it's about 13,000 square feet. And it's,
You had 90,000.
It's like about 11,550.
and that doesn't include the cost of replacing the flooring. So I'm also in the process of I've gotten those costs for the previous areas, but now that we're looking at a larger area, first I have to find out, is that something we're gonna have to bid, and if we do, then we'll need to be doing that fairly quickly as well, so that as soon as the tile is removed, we can get it replaced.
So that
Or there's a
even-
possibility that there may be an agreement with one of the, cooperative purchasing consortiums. That's what we used when we did our playground outside. So if there's something like that, then the pricing's already been negotiated and bid out, so then we wouldn't have to do our own bid. So, like I said, this is all happening very quickly, but.
That 90,000 is for the asbestos removal specifically, so then there would be another some.
70,000.
Probably 70 to 100,000 more to
So about
replace it.
150,000, 150 to 200, all in.
No, and there's a chance that construction materials are still scarce.
At least in talking to the flooring guy that's doing the lower level area, it sounds to me like that for their flooring products, it's probably not a big issue. I know that any kind of wood products are some of those that have been hit hard. But I know that our it's gonna take maybe 2 to 3 weeks to get by the end of this month, we'll start installing the flooring downstairs, and the time because it's a custom floor product, it was about a 2 to 3 week time frame to get that manufactured. So I don't anticipate that granted, I know that they'll ramp up over the summer, but I don't anticipate we'll have a problem getting flooring. It's just a matter of, do we wanna spend that much money?
And can we get an idea of the savings we're realizing now by doing this all at once as opposed to a separate project?
Well, I mean, I have estimates on that, but I'll have firmer, I mean, all I have right now are the consultant's estimates.
Sure.
But I will have firmer numbers on the 14th, but that's also the point in time when we'll have to make a decision. But I'll be able to get those things out to you the Friday before, because that's when they're telling me they can get me their bid analysis.
Okay.
It's a challenge
Yeah.
to predict how much we'd save, because the bigger costs of each time there's an incident,
Yeah.
their setup costs, and coming out and doing the whole process is gonna be more expensive. So it depends on how many, if we went room by room over the years and had a flood in every room, it would be way more expensive than doing it, but
Now you're talking 10 to 15,000 just for the consultant every time.
every time. So we've had how many incidences this year with asbestos?
We've had 2 this year, and then 1 several years ago in one of the Spectrum, 2 of the Spectrum classrooms, and actually room 217 also had where basically there was a separation, or there was a gap that had occurred, and then the tile was breaking up. And that we actually just had them come in and they just removed a couple of rows of tile. But I don't remember what that cost was either, but it wasn't cheap.
Well, it's not always water damage, there's other.
Right, there are other
material
things that
can
occur,
cause-
yeah, other things that can damage it.
Yeah, this year it's been water, but
Yeah,
Yeah, this year's been water.
Yeah, I'm all for getting rid of asbestos.
right.
Although, you know, the other thing too, though, is that we're not gonna get 60 years out of any type of, any other kind of floor covering. You know, when I look at how old that tile is, you know, asbestos did really hold up well, but now that it's getting to the point that it seems to be getting damaged, you know, it probably is time to get rid of it. I think it would make, you know, I think hopefully it would make the, parents and staff members feel more comfortable knowing that that's out of the building.
Would this be an opportunity to put in that other flooring that we
Right.
had done in the other place,
Right.
the other room?
Yeah, that's what we were
The
looking at.
high
And then-
durability, whatever. low
And then in
maintenance.
the areas where we do currently have carpeting, like in the office areas, we're talking about looking at some type of a, carpet tile rather than, so then if there's a wear area, like we typically get in an office, you know, you can kind of replace that section as opposed to replacing all the carpet. Now, that doesn't mean that there might not be a slight difference because of fading or whatever, but at least you don't have the worn out carpet, that you're having to deal with all the time. And then you can also do things where you can do contrasting colors, or, you know, you can do some things that make it appear that you designed it that way too. We did something like that at the middle school. We had somebody had spilled bleach back when we actually allowed bleach in the schools, on the carpeting, and so then we put in, if you are in the main office at the middle school down that hallway, there are, it's either red or blue, diamonds that are in the floor. Well, the diamonds are in there because it's covering up, we replaced an area that was damaged by bleach. So it was never designed that way, but it looks really nice right now.
I will warn you guys, the week of June 11th to the 18th, I will be out of town. We'll actually have no internet access or anything, so.
That sounds great.
Yes.
Fantastic.
No more Zoom calls.
But I will find the, verbal ballpark numbers that the consultant gave me when he was here Friday, and I'll type those up and send them out to board members. So you kind of get an idea of what you might expect with the bids. But even with the last bid that we did, or actually it was quotes, but the range was like 30,000 to 60,000. Well, you know, that one came in at 35,000, so we got a really good deal. So a lot of it just depends on how anxious people are to work, and from what the consultant has told me, a lot of these, removal companies pretty much have June already locked up, but they're looking for work in July, which hopefully will mean that we'll get good pricing.
Do we have any more questions on this? All right, let's hear about our FOIA request.
There it is.
Looks like he's digging.
So for FOIA requests, by law, we have to post these on board agendas every time we get one, so, you'll see these probably monthly, FOIA requests, and, depending on what the request is, usually it ends up being business office request. Dr. Jones takes care of it, or Veronica will take care of it. So we have to inform you.
Future agenda items. As policy updates, phone system, district consolidation plan? Consolidated plan?
So that, the C and D are simply the grants that we have to approve every year that the board has to approve. So in order for us to get the money from the state, we have to have on record that the board approved us asking for money from the state. So it's a consolidated district plan. We do that in June. Start doing it in June, and
If
then
we want
update
the
it
dollars to
following
go back to July 1, we have to do it prior to June 30th.
year. Right,
And the title grants are also probably part of that.
it's all part of that.
And I didn't put on there there's an idea grant as well as the early childhood preschool grant that now go directly through the district that are part of that consolidated. They're either part of that consolidated plan or they have a different consolidated. I think they have a different one.
Yeah.
Does anybody have anything they'd like to add to the future agenda? Superintendent's report.
Great. We had 8th grade celebration last Friday night. It went very well at the middle school. Students moved from station to station. I should ask Sean how it went.
Yeah,
Fred?
yeah. It was great to have something. I mean, it really was.
Yeah.
It was excellent. I think we did
It was
last
well
year.
organized, we enjoyed it.
Well done, yeah, and the volunteers that were there very much appreciated. It was good.
Nice to see Mrs. Ard again.
Yep.
So there were some complaints about lack of air conditioning.
I was just saying it's a little warm, but
Blame the school board.
I heard the complaints already. I passed them on to you, and,
The air conditioning was working very well today in most rooms,
good. Glad to
just
hear.
in time.
You're a day late and
So, yeah, I thought it went very well, and it was fun to see people in person that I haven't seen the kids, much less parents, in a long time. So it was fun to reconnect. They graduate Wednesday evening. There's 4 different graduation ceremonies. There's 2 small group ones and then 2 drive-through times. And so that'll go pretty quick on Wednesday night.
Is anybody from the board invited or not invited? Or?
You're all invited to go to any of them. They start at 4 o'clock and they end at 7.
Can you give us a schedule for that?
There's nothing for you to do other than hang out. It's all pre-recorded, so it's a little bit weird this year, as it was last year. We pre-recorded the speeches, so Brendan was there last week, pre-recording the board speech that the board president gives every year, and then I give a short little speech, and that was pre-recorded. The awards are already recorded, the graduate speeches were already recorded. It's done, except now reading the names. So today I spent some time with kids, just for a few minutes, asking them how to pronounce their names and how would you like me to say your name when you go across this stage, to try and get it right. I still screwed it. I had some of them written out phonetically, and I went back to one of them and said, did I get this right? She said, no. I will. I practiced more after that. So I will do my best. So we have that Wednesday. Thursday afternoon is a teacher staff appreciation, which will be at the middle school. We're getting ready for that. It'll be a cookout, barbecue. Hopefully the weather holds out. Doesn't look great for Thursday, but we have a tent coming. Veronica got us a tent set up that'll be in the back, and we'll have the gym. We'll be using both gyms for spacing and for the final if I wanna call it ceremony, but for the, where we, talk about years of service awards and retirements, that'll be in, I believe, the East Gym at that time, so we'll kinda go, move around station to station too. And should be good. I'm looking forward to that, seeing the whole staff, or most of the staff together in one place, under one roof. It'll be nice. And then Friday, school's out. And then we focus on summer school. We have a week off and then summer school wraps up again, so it should be, an exciting, busy week. Good in a lot of ways.
Excellent. Business office report.
Okay, that's the only thing we haven't talked about is the insurance, renewal for the, workers' comp and liability. Positively, our modification factor for workers' comp, which is, if it's less than 1, then that's good. If it's more than 1, that's not necessarily good. We went from a
1.04 to 0.92.
right, and our rate is going down about $20,000. Unfortunately, I think all of you heard about the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack. That happened just 2 or 3 days before we were ready to have our renewal meeting with the insurance cooperative, and the company that had given them the initial pricing pulled their bid. And so we were able to get coverage. We had to agree to do certain things and have a plan to do those. One is training for ransomware, phishing training, backup of records, either in the cloud or whatever, and then looking at multi-factor identification for passwords. So those are all things over the coming year that we need to implement on a regular basis. If we don't do, for districts who weren't willing to do that, for instance, we have $2 million worth of coverage. They're only going to get $250,000. But our cost for that program increased from $4,299 last year to $12,792 this year. But I also understand, because it is, and we've had several school districts within the insurance cooperative that have had ransomware attacks. We didn't have that, but we did have this also covers identity theft, etc. We did have an instance where something that we had mailed to CEDAW was damaged. Some of the pages were missing. And I do have to say that in working with the company that handles, part of that cyber security kind of thing, they were fantastic to work with. So, overall, things aren't bad considering the market. And just in looking at what kind of coverages we have compared to a district that's not in the cooperative, it's just amazing when I look at what we're able to do with the insurance. And then the fiduciary liability insurance increased by just under 5%, about $100. And then I'll be reporting later on the wellness policy review. We did that via Zoom, and I think we had about 22 that signed up. I had about 13 that actually showed up at the meeting. We even had a student from the middle school that participated. I kind of there was a questionnaire that we had to rate, and so I did polling questions for each of those items, and then we had discussion afterwards, and I was really pleased at how well it went, considering the fact that how we had to do the meeting. It's not necessarily an exciting topic to go through board policy, but we had the people. It was really interesting to hear Arbor talk about, even just to let people know that the snacks that they serve that are available at lunches have to meet certain criteria. What those smart snack rules and guidelines were was something that we had Arbor go over for them. And I'll probably send a follow-up to them to see if I can get some additional information so that we can, maybe put some of the plan together. This is something we only do every 3 years, but I'll be bringing that back to the board. And if there are any recommendations for changes to the policy, we'll bring those back as well. That's about it, unless anybody has any questions.
All right. Does anybody have a board report?
Just to say thanks again, I mentioned earlier, but all the activities surrounding the graduations, not only the staff and everybody making sure it happens, all the support of volunteers too, so it's greatly appreciated. My son's graduating this year, so it's really nice to have him go through something.
Lots of volunteers.
Yeah, they're really great.
Mrs. Ide and Mrs. Misha were primary drivers of the
Yeah, it's good to see her.
process. Yeah.
Good to see her.
Student volunteers were really good too.
Yep.
Do we have any closed session? No.
Yes,
Mhm.
if you would like as a board to have an update on the negotiations,
All right.
we did meet last time and have put together a little bit, for our fair pros, so if you would like to tonight, we can go over that.
All right. So, let's see, a motion to move to closed session for the purpose of, I don't have the requirements in front of me. Collective negotiation matters between the public body and the employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees. Is there a second on this?
Second.
We have a roll call, please?
Ms. Boss?
Yes.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes?
Mr. Lorenzen?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Mr. Pederini?
Yes.
Mr. Quinones?
Yes.
And, when we come back, we're just closing, we're not gonna take any action.
No more action, no more action items.
For
Thanks,
those
Mr.
watching
Wilshire.
online, thank you. If anyone would like to.